Thank you very much, Pastor Steve. I would like to call up Julie Millsap, who is here to represent the campaign for the Uyghurs, to hear the story of that atrocity in China.
Thank you so much, and to Pastor Bob Fu for giving a few minutes and encouraging us to speak today and giving us this platform as well. It's personally very meaningful to me because I spent the last decade living in China. My husband is Chinese and our family are there, and we've always closely followed the work of China Aid and been greatly encouraged by it. As a Christian myself, and now involved in Uyghur advocacy, so working with predominantly Muslims. But just as been mentioned here, what's happening to the Uyghurs, and many of you may be familiar, may not be war in the sense that most people think of it, in a literal and declared sense officially. However, I would make the point that actually the Chinese officials have declared war against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples, using language that I think will be a punch in the gut when you hear things like human problem. Uyghurs have been referred to in official documents and by officials as a human problem, as people who need to be cured of a disease. This type of language, we know what comes from this language and alienation and deliberate differentiations of people as the other. And there are a lot of really literal semblances of things that echo back to the worst parts of history, and it's so meaningful even to hear quotes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of my personal inspirations. But as you know, the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, as well as Kazakhs and other Turkic peoples, are facing what has been referred to rightfully so as active genocide. This is war against civilians. So the CCP's actions to weaponize religion and defame Uyghurs as extremists while waging war on Islam and religion in general is of course tied to the fear of independent thought, and something that's fed into with this deliberate move of people into being the other and deliberately stirring up fear among the Chinese population. So we'll see also, I'm going to briefly talk about how our advocacy actually addresses one of these problems of how war is created. So in addition to herding millions of innocent people into concentration camps and what is essentially modern day slavery, Beijing is announcing openly to the world that they will rewrite the Bible and the Quran to be more in line with communist atheist ideologies as defined by Xi Jinping at present, and to demand uniform ethnic identity and loyalty to Xi and to the party. And so the Uyghurs' religious identity is used as a cover for also some broader goals when we see that the same tactics are also being used against Christians, against Tibetans, against Hong Kong. But of course, this is the most extreme situation at present in terms of physical death. So the Uyghurs' religious identity is being weaponized against them, and the crimes against humanity that are being carried out by the CCP are really too numerous to list, and many of you may have read about them, but just to use these words and remind us. We're talking about forced marriage, mass rape, Orwellian surveillance, forced abortion, mandatory birth control, forced sterilizations, arrests, beatings, tortures that it is very difficult even for someone who works in human rights to listen to people testify to personally. Child abduction, brainwashing, forced organ harvesting, crematoria. Yes, murder. People are dying in these camps. And another aspect of this is the psychological toll that this takes on an entire generation of people. Effectively, they have already been destroyed, to be perfectly honest. And people in the human rights community dealing with immense secondhand trauma. So we see the effects of war right now, at present. And the lack of support, that's a whole other topic I won't get into today, but there are many reasons for that. And one thing that I would like to say, though, is that in spite of the lack of support from the Muslim world and the many reasons for that, China is waging a broader war on democracy and the free world. And it's not going to stop with the Uyghurs. And so that's a big part of our messaging. If China is allowed to get away with this as a last and final wake-up call, just as Tibetans, Southern Mongolians, Hong Kongers, Chinese Christians, and many more have all been targeted and suffered, we have to take a last opportunity to stand together and say that we must defend freedom in our world today, and religious freedom in particular, as war has already been declared against us. So I want to remind that in these dark times, I work with a predominantly Muslim people group, and one thing that I have heard recently is, when the Muslim world abandoned me, I see how the Christians and the Jewish community are standing up and speaking out. And this is not a criticism of Muslims. There are many Muslims who actually are very involved in advocating, but it's to make the point that our way of fighting this war also is to build solidarity and through events such as this today. So thank you so much. I'm honored to stand together with you and happy to talk more with you after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. And finally, our last speaker today is Trita Parsi, who's an award-winning author, and he's the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. And he's also an expert on U.S.-Iranian relations. So welcome,